For a few years now, The Boys show has been the best anti-superhero show, and while I skipped out on Diabolical because I really just don't care about one-off anthologies that don't actually mean anything, and I thought that this would be different, and it kinda was, but also kinda wasn't. But let's make this an actual quick hit for once. Spoilers for Soup's first time living on their own. For a story about super hormoned up young adults trying to find their way in the world, the show was actually pretty entertaining for me. Sure, the college drama would get a little grating as the show went on, but I do think some of the ways the character struggles were framed, like Emma's body image issues spurned on from her mom, mirroring Jordan's body image issues spurned on from their parents, were depicted in a really interesting way that didn't feel like it was surface level. I'm not an expert on these types of things, but I think they were handled well enough that from an onlooker's perspective, it wasn't like, I don't think that's how that works. For the most part, this has everything that I want to see in a The Boys project. Decent satire of current events, some comedy, way more blood and gore than I would like to see in person, and being better than the comics, which sure isn't that hard, but I have to set the bar somewhere. I do think that the Soup Civil War brewing is going to be interesting in The Boys proper. However, I do have some issues with this story in general. Now listen, I get that young people are always and forever going to be written as overall emotional and impulsive, but I'm so sick of seeing characters doing the "you made me do a thing that I chose to do," and this happens enough times in the show where you don't feel like the characters are thinking at all, especially during the ending with Sam and Kate, but we'll get to that when we're talking about the characters themselves. I do like the overall idea of them expanding on the Soup pipeline, but honestly, this could have just been a mini arc within The Boys proper, so while it's functional and works, I don't think it's as compelling or interesting as any of the seasons of The Boys that we've seen so far. For me, a spinoff should just stand on its own and tell a story that couldn't be told in any other situation, but season 1 of Gen V didn't feel like it added anything to The Boys, and from a regular show's perspective, it didn't really feel that special. Now, even though the story wasn't that interesting to me, there's still a lot to like here, but only if you're interested in like 3 characters, those being Marie, Jordan, and Emma. During the first few episodes, I actually thought Marie as a character was gonna go in a very different direction. I was thinking that this would be a villain origin story for her, where she turns against everyone because she feels like there's no one who genuinely cares for her, and after she learns that her sister wants nothing to do with her, she finally snaps. Unfortunately, that is not what we got, but overall, I did enjoy Jazz Sinclair's performance, and was really impressed with how much emotion she conveyed even during the more quiet moments. There's really not a bad performance in the show, but between Marie, Jordan, and Emma, I think because Marie is a little more fleshed out and has more to do in the show, she has more opportunities to show off her range. For Jordan, played by London Thor and Derek Liu respectively, I think both did really well in their scenes, and the show does a good job of never making it like either Jordan was actually the main one. They both felt equally important. I really liked how Jordan has different powers based on the gender that they are at any given moment, and I think with the way they fight by switching between male and female during fights shows how they're more fluid and switch with what feels right, which works with them being by gender. The Boys is usually pretty good with taking on concepts like gender identity, and I think Jordan was a really interesting way to go about it, because even in a world where there's invisible people, a girl who can get tiny or embiggen, and we don't even need to talk about Love Sausage, there's still people who wouldn't accept Jordan because of something as surface level as what gender they want to present at that moment. Also really enjoyed the dichotomy between Marie and Jordan, because when they first meet and butt heads, I thought, why do we always have to put 2 queens up against each other? And later, we see the 2 queens up against each other, and suddenly, I forgot about everything I didn't like in the show. Now, the last character that I want to talk about that I liked as a character and their performance was definitely Emma, who was played by Lizzie Broadway. She's the mess of a friend that you kinda always need to have around, even if they really should definitely take some time to just reflect on things. For me, I thought the eating disorder angle worked, but only from the perspective of it being misunderstood from everyone else. Again, I'm not familiar with eating disorders like that, so I might just be off base, but it seemed more like that was just a side effect of how she used her powers. If she was constantly worrying about her caloric intake like her mom wanted her to, then I would think that angle worked better, but it seemed more like Emma was just embarrassed because throwing up is gross, and not using that as a means to be more socially acceptable like that girl who exposed her for clout was trying to say. I actually think it's pretty similar to how Marie cuts herself, and they present it as how that sounds in our world, but until recently, she didn't have any other way to easily use her powers. We see that when she's alone and in a vulnerable moment, it is used in the way we would think of it in our world, but I read of it more as her just being angry at her powers and lashing out in that way rather than it being a pain response. I don't know. If you thought the real world analogs worked, let me know, because maybe I'm just not thinking about it the right way. But there's actually one last character that I want to talk about, because even though he doesn't actually do much here, he's one of my favorite reinventions in this boys verse. I'm talking about Tek Knight. In the comics, Tek Knight was just homophobic Batman / Iron Man, and aside from the way he dies, which I'll let you look up because it's one of the only actually funny things that happen in the comics, they took the world's greatest detective angle from Batman here and just ran with it. I think it makes him feel more interesting here than just being an obvious parody, and with Derek Wilson's calculating and almost sociopathic performance, I'm really excited to see what they do with him. But now, we are at the characters I did not like, even though their performances were still pretty good. Andre, played by Chance Perdomo, is a fuckboy, and I don't like fuckboys. Sam, played by Asa Gurman, was really compelling to me because he was always a ticking time bomb, but I was thinking that because of his connection with Emma, he would be something like the anti-Homelander, where he might have violent outbursts, but does actually try to do some good. Obviously, that's not gonna happen now with him being turned into an emotionless monster, so there's like 3 Homelanders running around now, and while the virus in this show does seem like it'll turn out to be some type of trump card, I'm sure it won't be that easy with these dudes. But for the main reason that I just cannot get behind Sam as a character is because he's just such a piece of shit, and like, yeah, I get it. He was tortured. He has schizophrenia. He has a lot going on. But him attacking Emma for no reason when she has objectively only done things for his benefit just because she doesn't think murdering every human is okay was just such a terrible turn. Like, it really doesn't even make sense for him to feel this way when he should just be mad at Vought or the doctor specifically. What the fuck do the regular teachers have to do with him being tortured? He got radicalized in like 30 minutes to be against regular humans, and it's similar to the guy who got radicalized in season 2 of The Boys proper, but we saw him get radicalized over constant exposure to garbage. Even if he was like, we have to do this so no one else has to go to the woods, then cool, that's fine. That's at least a reason. I think that makes sense for him to think that. But that's not even what happened. Sam slid on some ice, attended a thinly veiled soup rally, and came out like, yeah, all humans are bad. Like, what? Asa did a really great job playing a person struggling with mental issues, but Sam as a character, especially at the end, just kind of sucked when he should definitely still have problems with Kate, but he just moves right past those like it doesn't matter. Which brings us to Kate, played by Maddie Phillips. I think she has a really cool power and a good drawback that doesn't make it OP, but I just cannot stand her heel turn in like the last 2 episodes that came out of nowhere. Now, it's true that she's been apprehensive of lying to everyone for years at this point, and while it can be argued that because she stopped taking her meds, she's not thinking clearly and she was medicated for a good reason and now she's off the leash, and I do think that's kind of what happened, but like Sam does the exact same thing, and realistically he has a way better reason to fly off the handle and turn into an anti-human terrorist. But what is Kate's reasoning exactly? The only people that have mistreated her were her parents and Shetty. Where'd her superiority complex come from? If she was weirdly dropping hints about how she thinks soups are better, then again, cool, whatever. This would make sense, but she spends the entire show like a regular person and then turns into a soup supremacist for no reason and acts like this is somehow going to help her friends. Kate plays into the major point of The Boys as a whole, which has been that the power of manipulation is by far the strongest power, starting with Stillwell and Stan Edgar controlling the Seven, and that theme goes into this show with Brink and Shetty, and it will be interesting to see how this continues with Newman making a run for the presidency. But for Kate to have this power, I feel like she has to have a substantial role going forward, or Homelander just punches a hole in her chest, who knows. Now, we do know that the virus is going to have some impact in The Boys at large, and I guarantee you they're going to make parallels with COVID, but I actually don't think that much from this show is actually going to be relevant. And since the show's already deviated from the comics plot to the point where I don't even really think you can infer what's coming next, I feel like aside from Butcher finding some remnant of the virus's DNA in the woods or something and trying to find someone to synthesize it, there's really not much connective tissue for these characters to really interact. But I feel like throwing out some wild speculation around for once. So, for season 2 of Gen V, I think they'll obviously focus on Marie, Emma, Jordan, and Andre attempting to get out of the room that they're locked in. But I think they become the boys' version of X-Force or even the Suicide Squad, where they carry out Black Ops style missions for the government since they obviously have a plan for them because Homelander could have just killed them, but he must have been told to only incapacitate them for some use later. Shetty mentioned that Marie has some sort of benefactor, which is why she didn't give her up to the scientist guy, and I thought she was either bluffing or talking about herself. But since we know that Victoria has been keeping her eyes on her, maybe she pulled some strings to get a team of like-minded supes that she could control and send them on missions. Especially since we don't really know what her goal is with the virus. Her spreading it could lead to her own daughter getting sick, and based off of the last season, she wouldn't do something that dumb that would endanger her. And even though she's a situational ally of Vought, she's still always looking out for number one, so I don't think it would be off the table as a sort of deterrent, especially if something does happen to her daughter. Which makes me think that the virus does get spread, which reduces the suit population significantly and leads into the final Homelander v Butcher fight, which then leads into Gen V Season 2, which is the aftermath, where the 4 characters escape into a world with no supes after doing some of that Black Ops work. Could be cool. But for this season of this show, it's weird for me to wrap up my thoughts around it because it's well made, the CGI doesn't look out of place, it's still funny, it's got some interesting ideas, but it also just feels like there's too much missing that doesn't make this feel like a full story on its own. Honestly, this is why I don't give number reviews on these, because I don't know how you quantify something as nebulous as, I don't know, it was cool, I guess. If you're a The Boys fan itching for something new in the world, this functions as that, but I don't think any of the characters feel as deep as any of the mainline cast. And even though they have the same number of episodes as any of the mainline seasons, it feels like there's just way more going on in those than here. But after watching this season, I'm actually more interested in seeing what they do with season 2, since they obviously can't go back to the school and are presumed dead. So we have to see how they navigate that, but that's still a little ways off. But let me know what you think. Was this a passing spinoff, or did it miss the mark? Let me know in the comment section below. Like, sub, and thanks for watching.